Right, we're continuing in chapter 8. We are at verse 18. We just learned that wisdom is going to be found if we seek it. So let's go to verse 18. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. So, following the path of wisdom as a general rule, we are in a sinful world, so sometimes it acts in a perverse way. But as a general rule, leads to worldly success, to material success. This isn't a prosperity gospel saying, because you have earned God's love, you're going to achieve this. But it is saying that behaviors which are wise lead to good outcomes. Okay? Now, from an eternal perspective, they do lead to good outcomes. They lead to eternity and salvation of other people. From a present mortal perspective, with the fall into sin and the activity of Satan, sometimes people like Job, faithful man, upright, very wise, suffer. But the long-term outlook, the probability, and the general truth here is that when you follow the path of wisdom, you do achieve material success as well. Now note, the fruit is better than fine gold because it lasts. And it has a permanent consequences. The material things of this world are not permanent. The results of wisdom, loving God and loving your neighbor, and your neighbor learning to love God and love you, those are permanent. 20. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the paths of justice, bestowing wealth on those who love me and making their treasuries full. Ultimately, the treasuries in heaven are full. Okay, 22. This is, and I'll just read here in my footnote of my study Bible, a hymn describing wisdom's role in creation. Wisdom here is personified. In addition, these verses have traditionally been understood as a messianic prophecy, a description of the pre-incarnate Christ. They provide some of the language for the New Testament portrayal of Christ as the divine word, as we find in John 1, and as the wisdom of God, as we find in 1 Corinthians and in Colossians. Here, wisdom is an attribute of God involved with him in creation. So wisdom is not Christ here, but it points to Christ, and when we look at it, it often will later be referenced. Actually, Christ will be referenced in conjunction with this. So you don't want to reduce Christ to wisdom, but you do want to see that wisdom is that Christ contains wisdom and uses wisdom, that it is a part and parcel of who he is. Anyway, 22. The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works, before his deeds of old. So unlike Christ, who is from the beginning, uncreated, here wisdom is brought forth. Okay? Before God set up the universe, he knew the system. He knew how things were going to work, which is important. If you don't take into account the interactions of gravity and magnetics and sunlight and heat and mass and oxygen, and all these things, you're going to have disaster. This is kind of the theory that people are giving with various climate and disease and Jurassic Park chaos theory, that things are beyond us and we don't recognize the consequences of even our littlest action, that it can result in ripples, which can make tidal waves, which can cause calamity, unseen. Well, God, before he created the world, already had the wisdom to create the world in a way that would make it perfect for our life in this world. Now, he also knew we would corrupt it with sin, and we have. We've corrupted it with sin, causing it to act in a way which is not perfect for life, but leads to death. But even then, in his wisdom, he set it up so we could survive even in this calamitous world to ripe old ages of 70, 80, 90, 100. And back, really early on, over 900. But he did this by setting up wisdom, system, a structure, which accounts for everything. And he knew and accounted for everything before he made it. Before he said, "Let there be light," he already knew that the light was going to be hitting my eyes today. Okay? So before the world was created, God set up this system of wisdom, the material system and the moral system. 23. I was appointed from eternity, from the beginning, before the world began. When there were no oceans, I was given birth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the earth or its fields or any of the dust of the world, I was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundary so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth, making them look rather old. That's why geologists think the world is so old, because God in his wisdom created an old earth. Not a literally old earth, but an earth that was mature. Like he created Adam as a full-grown man, he created the earth using his wisdom, ready to support life, not in its infancy. Going on 29, when he gave the sea its boundaries so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was the craftsman at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. Rejoicing in the orderliness and the structure and the beauty of a world which seeks out life, which does things sometimes just because they're beautiful. Because God has this aesthetic. When God created the world, it shouldn't surprise us that we live in a world of order where we can recognize natural laws and make predictions of the future. This is how science works, right? You do something and it continues to do it. It's because in his wisdom, which is order and structure, God made an orderly and structured world. And it shouldn't surprise us that there's amazing beauty. Order sometimes in what we would think was chaos, and in the sunset, where light hits the dirt in the sky and it hits at angles against the atmosphere, and it diffuses and it spreads out, and the colors mix and mingle, and you look up, and it's absolute beauty. Seemingly chaotic, and yet, to our eyes, orderly and wonderful. The beauty of God displayed. Well, that was because of wisdom. God knew what he was doing. He designed the world to do these wonderful things, to have great sunsets and sunrises after volcanoes erupt, to have the land renew itself after Mount St. Helens erupted. He figured that out. He figured out how to get carbon dioxide out of the air so that we won't boil and we won't have our sea level act like it did at the time of Noah. Mixing two names. God's wisdom has always been there. And that's why science works so well. That's why when you study art, you can put structure to what is aesthetically pleasing. Because God's wisdom undergirds everything. All right, 33. Guess I'm on 32. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not ignore it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For whoever finds me finds life and receives favor from the Lord. But whoever fails to find me harms himself. All who hate me love death. Since wisdom undergirds everything, and since it leads us to Jesus and God's plan, seek wisdom. It leads to the way things should be. Okay, we're going to close there.